How's it going, Anthony? Welcome back to episode 2.
Welcome back. We're back. We got another one. We got another one in the books.
So today's episode is pretty great because we have a special guest on for the very first time.
I'm super excited. I know you guys like to
And
hear us a little bit back and forth a little bit, but we love to have a guest on.
yeah, and I think it adds a very interesting dynamic, hearing some outside perspectives. We're continuing this going forward from this episode on, talking to people all across the world in different industries. And I think it's going to be a really cool way to bring in other people's, insight into this situation we're in.
Yeah. Alex, who do we got today?
So today we have Loren. She does human resources for a food-based nonprofit here in Florida. And Anthony, do you want to just go ahead and get right into it?
Let's do it, brother.
I'm Alex.
I'm Anthony, and this is 6 Feet Away. Loren, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am so good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for being here. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So, I work for a nonprofit and we are focused usually on ending hunger throughout the world. But recently, we have been focusing our efforts on domestic distribution of food.
Is this normally what you do, or do you see any sort of change since this pandemic has taken over?
Yeah. So we actually have two different business models that run congruent with one another, and one is focused on meal packaging events, which obviously we have had to put a stop to because we're not allowed to gather large groups of people together. And then we also have a second line of business where we send food out to people who need it, basically a grocery delivery service. But we are a nonprofit, so it's really reduced price. We are now rebranding as America's Virtual Food Pantry.
With your switch to that second business model, how's your staff handled it? Are you able to keep up with that increased demand for food being sent out?
So we have essentially switched every single staff member from our CEO down to food fulfillment, whether that is packing actual meals to be put into these boxes or whether that's putting pre-packed meals into boxes and shipping them out. So every single person on our team is now fulfilling all of these orders that have come in, and we have a lot of corporate partners that have placed bulk orders for their staff and also to just help other communities that they are involved in.
Just seeing the numbers, Alex, I meant to text you the other day, just seeing the actual numbers of unemployment and just to see the staggering amount. What was it, 10 million now, at least?
Well, especially since the last episode we mentioned 3 million,
Yeah.
and then we like launched the episode, and then it's just kidding, 6 million this week. So yeah, a total of 10 million people unemployed right now.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that, just the amount of people looking for some sort of like out or, food for their family and kind of looking at your nonprofit as a way for them to kind of supplement what they're doing or, whatever little that they have. I don't I don't see how this is getting any better anytime soon, but it's nice to know, Lauren, that you work for an organization that does something like this. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, we're honestly so blessed to still have jobs at this point
Yeah.
because we are an events-based company. And so once we realized that we were not going to be able to facilitate those events, it got really scary for a short amount of time. And we had really tense meetings where we were discussing, are we going to have to lay people off? What does that look like for our staff? How can we, save the most amount of people if we're not bringing any money in? What does that look like for us? And that was a really difficult conversation to have because it's not just business at that point. It's these people. We only have 35 people on our staff. Like, I know every single one of them. I know what their partner's name is. I know what their kids' names are. And then to tell them, hey, sorry, you no longer have a job, that would be a very hard conversation because it's not through any fault of their own. It's just what's going on in the world. And so we actually switched up our business model pretty much within the space of 3 weeks. Our grocery fulfillment service was not ready to hit the road full steam ahead. We were not in a place to be fulfilling tens of thousands of orders. And we have just been working like crazy people. Pretty much all of our leadership staff has not had a break and has just been dedicated to making sure that we are getting things out at cost, making sure that we have enough food supply coming in, that we are looking into outside fulfillment partners as well to be able to keep up with demand. And so we're just honestly the luckiest people that I know to have been able to switch our business model that quickly and still all have jobs.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part, and I don't know if you guys have been watching the news a lot. As I said, I try not to watch it as much, but the more that I'm seeing just different facets of our country and how unprepared it seems in certain in ways with like medical supplies that we need or food or just household essentials. It's comforting to see that there are companies that are able to pivot in a way and do what's best, not only to make sure that the company stays afloat, obviously, but to help people to go still do the job that they're set out to do, but maybe have to tweak a little bit. Um, I love that. Um, yeah,
So I have a quick question. With everyone's in this hoarding mentality, I feel like going to the grocery store, people are trying to stock up and they're worried about flour running out. They're worried about XYZ running out. Are you guys noticing the same thing as far as your suppliers? Like, are you worried about your suppliers having the resources you need to pack your meals? Is that something that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our ops department works pretty independently. I'm in our human resources department, and so we do get updates from them. And I had seen a couple of articles talking about Vietnam no longer outsourcing or sending out. What is the word I'm looking for?
Exporting.
Exporting, thank you. Yeah, Vietnam is no longer exporting rice. And then there are some other countries that are no longer exporting wheat flour. So I have touched base with our ops department and said, hey, do we source anything from there? We're really lucky we source from the US only. And so far our supply chain has not been impacted, but that's definitely something that we are concerned about happening. Right now, we just want to get as much food in the door as we can so that we know that we're covered for quite a while, but then we also have to worry about, how much money are we going to pour into supplies that we may not necessarily be able to distribute. It's just a lot of what ifs, and there really is no answer. We're just we're chugging along.
yeah. Do you think it's sustainable? Like, what with just specifically, if you have to give an opinion on what you're doing, do you feel as though the model that you guys have set up and the suppliers that you have, do you feel like it's sustainable, or do you feel like at a certain point, like we just kind of need to get back to how life normally is and just go back down the old path?
Yeah, I feel both ways. I know that our actual program is sustainable. We have a lot of data that we've collected and we have worked out the cost, and it's definitely something that corporate partners are interested in. So, in that aspect, it is sustainable. We've talked to fulfillment partners. I think we're finalizing things with them. Our timeline right now is about 8 weeks out for that. So, as soon as we have that in place, then we are able to relieve a lot of our staff from this shift in responsibilities, because a lot of them had office jobs and now we're standing on our feet 8 hours a day packing boxes and making food. That's a huge shift, and I don't feel that that portion is necessarily sustainable because one, it's not what people were hired to do. Two, it is physically taxing on your body, and then three, we're all very heightened emotionally right now, and so where you might have just grumbled about being tired or being, sick of packing boxes when that's not what you wanted to do with your life, with all the stressors that are happening in the outside world, that response is going to be elevated. And so that's something that my department specifically is focusing on, is making sure that we mitigate as much of that burnout as we can, because we don't feel that it is sustainable to have people packing boxes consistently for 2, 3, 4 months into the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there are people that are still, if they are working or if they are in a like a necessary job, not necessary job, I forgot the word, like essential job, like that, where you have workers and you need to make sure that they're healthy, because without them, that business isn't able to operate. I feel like it's a lot of touch and go, and companies, unfortunately, that are having to deal with those essential businesses, they're like, I would say freaking out a little bit. If I was
Yeah.
a business owner and I had to, manage a store like a supermarket and make sure that all of my employees, felt safe for one, made sure that they were healthy if they weren't, like notifying us. There's just like there's a lot of other things on top of what like your base job. I didn't want to say base job, but kind of like your job description of what you're required to do. I think that adding this virus into the mix now, you're having to pivot a lot more and to make things happen with the circumstances that we have.
What is something that you're doing that has changed as far as operational? I mean, other than, shifting your workflow, is there something operational that you're doing to keep people safe?
Yeah, 100%. There's, I mean, a million things that we are trying to focus on, and we're also trying to capture all the information that's being put out by the federal government, the state level, the county level, the CDC, the World Health Organization. It's a lot to keep up with because everything seems to be changing so rapidly as to what the recommendations are. Like, what was it, 2 days ago? The CDC now recommends that everybody wear masks if you're going out into public. And
I want to talk about this so badly. Go ahead, keep going.
And before that, the recommendation was that only if you are sick or if you think that you might be sick, then you wear masks. So that has completely changed things up because now, in order to make our staff feel like they are safe and that we have their safety as our number one priority, we have to source masks. But where do you source masks from right now? Because there are hardly none. So on top of that, we also have surveys that we send out. The Florida Department of Emergency Management has set a list of questions that if you answer yes to any of them, then you should not be in close contact with other people. So we use that as our guideline. We ask each of our employees to fill out a survey over the weekend before they come back in. We usually send it out on Sundays. And if they answer yes, then they're not allowed to come in for 14 days, or we have to have a more serious conversation about what their symptoms are. Because we've run into the problem where people say, oh, I have a cough, but then we find out that they have seasonal allergies and this is the same cough that they get this time each year. And so that's probably not related to COVID, but it's just a lot of keeping on top of people and trying to use what guidelines we have when we are not, medical professionals, and we're just kind of making the best guess that we can and trying to act in good faith at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that, because there's a lot of people, they're trying to make their employer aware that, hey, I'm not feeling well, just not to freak anyone out, but if
Right.
I do feel this way, like if I am exuding these symptoms, what does that mean for me? Am I putting other people in danger?
Right.
So yeah, it's very tough to think about. But I wanted to shift back a little bit. I wanted to talk about masks just because the CDC did come out with that statement, and it was like a few days ago, and there was like a whole uproar about it because everyone was saying at the beginning, well, hold on now. The CDC recommended to us that we didn't necessarily need a mask unless you were someone that was, exhibiting some of them symptoms to like to prevent like any further spread. But now it's recommended that we do wear the masks. So I don't know. I'm a little bit confused because it's a little bit of back and forth,
Right.
and like we're trying to listen, we're trying to like make sure we're doing everything correctly, but then it's like, well, if this is the way it is now, like, did we just not have enough information on the virus at the beginning? Do we now have more cases of this so that we can make a better um, request for people based on what we know now of the virus? Like, what do you guys think? Like, what's your take on it?
I think, and this is my personal opinion, that they saw an influx of people purchasing masks and wearing them just out of fear or precaution. And in order to kind of stem that and ensure that there were enough masks available for the people who actually needed them, healthcare workers or people who were sick, they put out the recommendation that you don't need one if you're not exhibiting symptoms or you have no reason to suspect that you're sick. I think that it was not necessarily untrue, right? Like I think that a mask could help, even if it just makes you feel better or feel safer. That has positive benefits. But if we're talking about, Joe Schmo on the street having a mask versus a nurse or a doctor, I would prefer that the nurse or the doctor has access to that. So I think it was just to kind of stem people from panic buying, but we saw that didn't necessarily happen.
Yeah, not at all. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a little it's a little confusing. I definitely agree that it might have been to some extent to limit or to ensure that they had availability for the essential people with masks in close contact with people actually with COVID. Um, but but now they probably have their resources shored up a little bit more, and I think if people aren't really following social distancing, it might be beneficial to maybe you don't have the symptoms and you're carrying it and you don't know, and here you are walking around. If you have a mask on, it might help. But then again, originally they were saying that it doesn't actually help you prevent it. It's only good for um, keeping you from spreading it. So I don't really know what to think.
Right, but now they're
And then
saying they're like, "Oh, you go ahead, go ahead."
I was gonna say, and then the president was like, "We should do this, but I'm not going to because it's just a recommendation." So
But that's the thing.
I'm like, what?
That's the point that I'm trying to make. It's like the CDC recommended it. Like I don't think this is something where they've said like, oh well, like you have to wear a mask. Like they're putting it in a way where it's up to you if you want to make like wear a mask. But then people are freaking out. Like enough people are freaking out already that they're in fear of getting the virus. So if the CDC makes a recommendation that maybe it's a good idea to wear the mask, like a lot of people are going to want to like follow through with that and actually try their best to buy a mask or to make a makeshift mask, like whatever it is. So it's just weird to me because it's like it's not like an official thing like you need to wear a mask, like we need to stay home, like you need to remain home. Like that's something that they've come out and said multiple times. Keep your social distance, like make sure you're not involved with other people that are outside of your household. Like they're very clear with that. When it comes to this mask situation, it's a little bit topsy-turvy. So that's why I'm a little confused about it.
Yeah, I think I'm at a place where I'm feeling like it's probably good to wear a mask. You should wear a mask if you can. If you don't, you know, I don't think that they're saying it's the end of the world, but we'll see. I don't know why you wouldn't want to.
Right, but like if you can't get one or like if you can't buy a mask, I understand the point of like if you can make one, but if you can't like get an acceptable mask that will prevent the spread of like droplets or anything like aerosol based, like it scares you because at this point you're the only thing you're going out for is essentials. So if you are leaving, you would hope that other people that are in the stores with you have some sort of mask, but if they don't and then you don't, on top of the already toppling chaos that we're going through, now you're like, great. Now I'm kind of like an open target, you would say.
Right, right. We had gone to the grocery store the other day to pick up some stuff, and everybody in the store, when you're walking down the aisle, you kind of give each other the eye now,
Yeah.
right? Because you never know what somebody might have or if they're an asymptomatic carrier. And I feel like it is a scary time. And if you are hearing that a mask could help, but there are no masks available, and you know that, making your own at home is not going to be as effective at stopping the spread of germs as one that is actually designed for medical use, it's terrifying to be outside. And if that is already something that you're anxious about, then your anxiety is just going to be heightened by that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are like on edge. They're already like their nerves are shot with I'm in fear I'm going to get the virus or if I do get it and I'm not going to be affected terribly like my grandmother might or someone else in my household. So it's just this constant fear and yeah, it's no, it's driving people crazy. It drives me crazy because then my family's like, "Do you want a mask?" I'm like, I mean, yeah, if you want to, but I don't really want one because I'm not really going out too much. And then I think about when I go run, like, do I need to wear a mask when I run out in public? So it's you think about these things. Well, Alex, what were you saying? I'm sorry, bro.
I was going to ask, you mentioned your experience going out to the grocery store. Can you speak a little bit more on your personal experience with what's been going on in the last couple weeks?
Yeah, well, I feel like my job is very tailored to who I am because I am pretty risk averse in my personal life. And so it just kind of makes sense that I work in risk management. It's been terrifying. It has been kind of like an emotional roller coaster. There are times where, you look outside and things look totally normal and it's easy to kind of think like, oh, okay, it's just a regular day. And then if you're reading the news and you get too deep into a spiral, it seems like the entire world is ending. And that is kind of an overwhelming weight to be thinking about. And then I think about all of the people that are on unemployment who have lost their jobs, who are worried about where their next meal is coming from, about the people who have family members or friends who are in the at-risk population, that they're worried that they might lose them because of somebody not being careful, or just because that family member or friend catches the virus. And I just feel a lot of grief for them. One of my coworkers shared an article recently with us from the Harvard Business Review talking about what you're feeling now is grief. You're going through all of the different stages of it at different times, and it's not a straight line. You're going to feel better some days, you're going to feel worse some days. And I think that it's just kind of figuring out how to navigate those emotions is hard. Sometimes I just feel like crying when I think about all of the people that haven't been as lucky as, me and my coworkers are to continue to have jobs. Some who they can't switch their business models, or they don't have, a different line of business to lean on. People who don't have the money to purchase food in bulk. People who just don't know where their next paycheck is coming from, and that it's a weight.
Do you feel like because of this pandemic that's occurred and people that have jobs that have now lost them, so they have already filed for unemployment, if and when we get back to normal life, and I say normal life with quotations, you can't see me, but quotations, normal life, do you think in their mind, like if they're looking for a new job or whatever, that they're keeping it in the forefront of their mind, like, hey, in case something like this goes down again, maybe I want to be in an industry where there's a little bit more job security, or there's like a job that no matter what happens, like it'll always be needed. You think people's mindset change when it comes to that stuff?
I hope so. I think that would be a really positive thing to take away from this situation. There will always be people who are interested in gig work or non-traditional jobs, and that is totally their prerogative. And you have the ability to make a ton of money in a really short period of time like that. But then there are jobs that are very steady and what we would call essential nowadays. And Alex and I actually had a conversation about this when things were starting to get really bad, and I was having a little bit of a freak out saying this was a really bad decision for us both to work in event-based businesses at the same time, because we would both be impacted by something that hits the event-based business. He has a government job, and so that is a little bit more secure. But I left a government job to work in a nonprofit, which, we're already working based off of donations and funds that we're able to raise. And when people's pockets are tight, they're not the most giving. And so that is a scary place to be. And I hope that people do think about what types of jobs that they're taking on and about the security of their future. But I think something other than that to be thinking about when the world goes back to whatever the new normal looks like is, how did the company that you're applying with, or the company you're interested in, how did they treat the people that worked for them? Because it's truly, it's not the leadership of a company that is driving it forward. It's the people who are sitting there doing the work day after day. And of course, the leadership helps and encourages and inspires and, paints this vision for movement and guides the ship, but it's the people who are doing the work. Like, I think it's important to know, did you lay people off at the first sign of trouble? Did you try and give them, additional resources? Or did you take everything away from them? What was it that you did to honor your staff that have held your business up for so long? And I think that that's something that everybody should ask in interviews going forward is, in response to COVID-19, how did your company handle that? And what did that look like for your staff? Because I think that will be very telling going forward.
I think that's a great question. I think that's something great moving forward, because it's true. Like they're cause and effect of what goes on. You looking to apply to somewhere and something like that does happen, why would you want to work for a company that maybe didn't treat their employees as well? Or, their policy for handling it might not have been ideal as you would hope. So yeah, I couldn't have said it better.
Do you think that's going to end up going on to those 10 questions to ask in your interview blog articles?
It's going to go on my blog articles, absolutely. I think that it is something that you should be cognizant of, though, right? Because on the one hand, HR's job is to look out for the best interests of the company, right? And then almost secondary to that is looking out for the employee, but you can do both hand in hand in some cases. And so I think that we've seen that it's possible for, the CEO to forego their salary for an entire year to ensure that their staff are able to make payroll. And we've seen other companies make promises to their staff members and their team saying, your job is safe for a year, at least, And that doesn't mean that if you stop showing up to work that they're not going to fire you, but that you're not going to be cut because they've made you this promise. And I think that is something that you should just ask, because you want to know if you're working for a company that is proactive or reactive. And I think that we've seen a lot of companies be reactive in, firing all of their part-time employees over a conference call like Sephora just did. Or, yeah, I mean, what an awful way to lose your job. Yeah, I saw a bunch of articles about it, and then I read somebody's firsthand account on Twitter, and she just said that her general manager told her that there was going to be a conference call at 3 p.m. or something, and all of the part-time staff got on, and the management of the company told them, hey, you guys no longer have jobs. There's no time for questions. Click, hung up.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a brand that I love to shop for or shop at. And now I'm going to be thinking twice about that, right? Because there are other options and other organizations that are doing their best to keep people employed. And at some point, maybe you just can't. And, that's a hard realization to come to. And we have to be understanding of that, the way that our economy runs and capitalism. If you don't have any money coming in, you can't just pay people to sit around and do nothing. But the intent of how you start out is something that I think will be very important to people moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's something that's in everyone's head right now, whether they think it, out loud or not, whether their job's essential or not. It's, am I going to get fired tomorrow? I heard another company, they sent out an email saying, we're letting 90% of our staff go. If you're being you'll receive a call from your manager and they'll tell you whether you're getting fired or not. So that's the email, and then you have to wait for the phone call from your manager. Can you imagine the anxiety for the next 3 hours? Is my boss calling me to tell me I'm getting fired or not? You know?
Yeah. I had one of my coworkers, her roommate, was having a freak out in their living room. They're both working from home now, and her roommate was freaking out because their internal messaging, I don't know if they have Slack or something for everybody, everyone was talking about the fact that their HR had scheduled meetings with certain employees and people were being let go, and you could see them become deactivated on Slack almost in real time. And one major fumble on HR's part, because those meetings should have been confidential, but then they started scheduling meetings with every single staff member. And that's just terrifying, right? Because you know what's going on. And even if you walk out not having been terminated, fired, furloughed, laid off, whatever, it's still just awful to be sitting there waiting for the shoe to drop, right? And then to have the reduction in force of your team, the hit to morale that takes when you're already at a time where emotions are so high. It's just, I don't know how a lot of companies are going to come back from that.
Yeah, it's scary for sure. I think a lot of what we're doing now, we're kind of at the mercy of everyone else, like from the CDC to the World Health Organization, just even our own government to our employers and our managers. Like we're waiting to hear what's next. And there's just so much that's out of our control. And I think that's so nerve-wracking, because it's like, what can I do to try to help fix the situation or make it better? And a lot of the times you kind of have to just sit and wait patiently, and that can be the scariest part of it all. Luckily for all three of us, I mean, thankfully we still have jobs. I'm very thankful for that. But for people that not like us, or people that have essential jobs that require them to work, I can only imagine the amount of just stress they must be under, and just trying to find how to make it to the next day or the next week or the next month's rent, just all of that stuff just culminating into one. Ugh.
For people who don't have a job, being that you do HR, do you have any tips for them? Is there something that you can recommend as far as getting back on track in this environment?
Yes, 100%. So actually, I think you kind of just plugged me in there, which was real smooth.
I didn't mean to.
Look at you.
I actually have my own website. It's called gettingyouhired.com, and it is all about helping people find jobs and ace their interviews and get a position that is the best one possible for them. And so I would say that something to be thinking of is there are still places hiring, right? And unemployment is pretty lucrative right now for a lot of people. With the additional $600 per week on top of whatever your state's unemployment benefit is, that's decent. You could live, maybe not to the extent that you were living, and maybe you will have to forego, a lot of Uber Eats, but you'll make it through. And so I think that using the benefit that has been provided through unemployment to take some time, figure out a game plan for yourself, really process your emotions and what kind of job you should be targeting. There are still companies hiring right now, and there will be tons of companies hiring after this. And so positioning yourself to be a top candidate is pretty simple, because honestly, I see a lot of, resumes come through, and I've done a lot of interviews, and let me just say, if you are slightly above average, you're probably a phenomenal candidate. And it's something that I've told my friends, and we kind of laugh about it, but maybe you think that what you're up against when you are applying to a job is a pool of, top tier, awesome people, and there's just no way you could ever get this great job because there just must be somebody out there who's better and who has applied for it. That's not necessarily true. I think the best thing you can do for yourself is put together a solid resume, practice before an interview so that you feel comfortable answering questions, and apply for every job that interests you. You don't have to create a tailored cover letter. Doesn't hurt, but it doesn't necessarily, get you the job. And just make sure that you are being genuine. You're going to end up with whatever job you were meant to have. Like, I firmly believe that. And the best thing you can do is just prepare yourself and apply.
Do you think there's anything to be said about your resume ending at this COVID time? If you, 2017 to 2020, do you have to explain that, or is this going to be something that people are kind of understanding as you lost your job because of COVID, not because you're a bad employee?
Right. And that's something that is very subjective, right? Every recruiter is totally different, which is why there is no just one size fits all answer to a lot of things. Because what I might think is phenomenal and very telling of a positive candidate on a resume, somebody else may not consider at all. Maybe they have something else that they look for. So you may not necessarily need to explain COVID on your resume, just like I know if I see somebody in 2008 have a gap, that's probably due to the recession then. But if you are dealing with a brand new recruiter who's fresh out of college and might not remember 2019, 2020, maybe they were a lot younger back then, it never hurts to explain, but I don't think it's something you need to put on your resume. I think it's something that if it gets brought up in a question, you can just say, oh, just like 10 million other Americans, I also lost my job because we were not able to perform, the essential functions of our job with the quarantine and with social distancing.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, this idea of life being back to normal. Do you guys see it as just once this all like blows over, like do we just go back to normal? Like is this like kind of like a renewal of essentially what we've been going through? Like what's your take on the day we get to just operate normally? We get to go out, work, see some friends after work, be social, and do it all again. Do you guys think it'll all be the same?
Should we both answer on 3 and we'll see what each other's answer
It's
is?
just gonna get mixed up, but I mean, no, like, I don't know.
You can go.
I was just going to say,
Yes or no?
Yeah, it's just yes.
I think it won't. I think it won't go back. No.
Why?
To be the
Why
same.
won't it be the same? There's no right answer.
People have for me, I think people have experienced a completely different world. Even if you are still working now, you're working from home. What is that? How does that affect you when you go back to work? Now that you have experienced this working from home, is that something that you're going to look for going forward? Are you going to want to change your job so that you work from home? Are companies going to continue working from home and not, have as many offices that they pay for? Um, are people going to want to go out more? I saw a tweet recently that was like, if you invite me anywhere, I promise I will show up early and I will bring beer. Like
Yeah.
people are going to want to be participating with their friends in activity. People are going to be used to going outside for walks more. Um, I think we will appreciate the little things a bit more.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be a little bit weird at first. I think there's going to be a sense of normalcy, but I also think of different parts of our lives that we enjoy, like social gatherings. You think of concerts, you think of basketball games, just going out, going downtown and just spending some night with people. But like there's part of me that like there's a sense of normalcy and like yep, we're just getting back to the grind of how life normally is, life goes on. But then there's that little bit of hesitation, like do I want to hug this person that I just met? Like we've just spent like 2 months just locked inside of our house, even though I know sometimes it can like feel like nonsense. But
I can't stand you anymore.
right, or like not even I can't stand you, but like just being like social with people. Like do we now take it differently because of all of this that's happened? Like even if the person isn't sick or hasn't never even had COVID, but the idea that we've gone through this for so long, it we have like a little wall that we put up now. Like does it mess with our ability to be social?
I don't think that things will return to normal as they were before this. But I think on the flip side of that, we're very good at forgetting
Yeah.
and moving forward. So I think that some things will change, and I think that some things will return to the way that they were before. I have a friend who her boyfriend lives in the UK and sometimes works in the US. He's a travel soccer coach. So he's in Pittsburgh right now. She's in Miami, and his family is in the UK. And so they have been having Zoom trivia nights and just hanging out and spending a lot more time together. And I think that it's really cool to see people connecting like that, and scheduling in time to be social with friends and family members that are farther away, not just relying on the people that are, really close by in the same town or maybe down the street to hang out with. And I think we're kind of expanding our social circles in that way. But I think that some things fundamentally will change. I know previously when, you couldn't just go to the grocery store and pick up whatever it is that you wanted, and you couldn't do Amazon Prime and have 2-day delivery like way, way back in the day, you would have to stock up on things and you would stockpile goods and you would have a lot more dry goods and shelf stable foods because you didn't know when the next time the grocery store got a delivery would be. And so I think that maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing if we reverted back to that sense of preparedness. I think that that could be beneficial to a lot of people. I know that it's been very easy to get to the last roll of toilet paper or to the very bottom of the tub of laundry detergent or to the part where your cabinets are almost empty except for maybe a couple of cans of food that you don't particularly want to eat. And then you have the ability to go into a store and pick up basically whatever it is that your heart desires. And so I think maybe for a little bit after this, those things will be a little bit more valuable to people, just the freedom to be able to do that. And I think that that could have a positive impact on our society.
Yeah, I think there's a silver lining. I think we're going to learn to appreciate life a lot more in certain aspects. I think there's certain things that we now wish we hadn't taken for granted. I think one of the biggest things that it's so daunting every day. You'll wake up and it's another day where you're stuck at home. It's the same old song and dance going on, practice your social distancing, wash your hands, all that good stuff. And you step outside and you see how nice of a day it is. Like I woke up today, it was a little bit of rain today, but I'm like, God, I just want to go to brunch. I just want to be social. I want my bottomless, and that's it. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm learning to appreciate more is just to be outside. Not that I wasn't outside before, but now like that's my only outlet to just have a life outside of my four walls. I take advantage of it, and a lot more people are as well. But I do think that there are certain industries, like certain business models, especially one of them, like off the top of my head, is just like going to the movies. Like you've seen it now, like certain Pixar movies, like that Onward movie. It's like it's now available for you to watch on Disney Plus, or like any of these new movies that are in theaters. You can now download them. So it makes me interested to think of what happens to certain business models now that the effects of this virus has like spread and put fear into people. Like, do certain industries and certain things just die out because of it? Does everything sustain? Like, that's what's interesting to me. And I feel like the movies is kind of like one of them where, even though it's a fun social thing, I feel like people are a little bit more apprehensive now, or at least when we get back to normal life.
One thing I think is definitely changing is people who are kind of laggards on online shopping and subscription services. Um, I think that they're being forced to do that now, and they'll get used to it and be comfortable with online shopping. I know my grandma, for example, would never want to give her credit card to anything on the internet, and now she's buying online because she doesn't want to go out to the store, right?
Yeah.
Personally, I signed up for a subscription box to get food sent to my house for fresh produce, and I like it a lot. I think I'm going to keep doing it even after COVID has slowed down. So I think those shopping behaviors are changing a little bit, and I think that will carry over as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we'll see either a trend one way or another. We'll either see people flooding public places and going to movies more frequently than they would have before, and going out to the mall and going shopping and going to restaurants because they are just so thrilled to be let out of their houses. Or we'll see the opposite of that, and we'll see a decline, because if this lasts quite a while, we'll see people having realized that they don't need to do those things, and that they can still receive the benefits of, seeing the movie that's brand new because now it's on a streaming platform, or they can just have food delivered straight to their door, or they can shop online and it's, a lot more convenient for them, and it's no longer a social thing. And so we might see the decline of those businesses, and we might see them have to shift their business model to a lot more online fulfillment.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation that happens with companies. Even, you look at shopping malls, like brick and mortars, kind of like besides certain places that obviously there are retail stores and there's places where you have to physically go into because it survives. But I think like now that this has happened, you have a lot more places just really doubling down on their online presence to be able to still like help and support customers and sell product and to, sell services or whatever, but not have to be in a space where you have to have employees that have to be in a retail space. So it does a lot of change. Like this virus is definitely making people's heads turns and scratching their heads for sure. And like, how do we make this better? Or how does one handle themselves in a situation like this if another virus were to arise? Because of course, like there's always something else.
Yeah. And I firmly believe that the bigger our population gets overall globally, the more we'll have instances like this, especially since we're traveling all over the world. So as morbid as that is,
I know it's the truth though, man. I just want to take a $26 round trip to LA, man. That's all I want.
I'm about it. We have a new CEO, and he and I have had conversations talking about just how unprecedented all of this is, and how there is no playbook to follow, and there aren't rules and there aren't policies already put into place, and everybody is just, doing what they think is best based on the information that we have available to us. I think it will set a precedent moving forward, which I'm excited for, because I think we'll learn a lot through this. And it will really shape the way that we work, because there will be a lot of companies who may previously not have been into the idea of remote work for their employees because of a myriad of reasons, right? Maybe they don't feel like people are actually going to work if they're at home, or maybe they don't feel like productivity is going to be as high, or they just have trouble relinquishing control like that. And I think we will see a shift where people are more inclined to want to work from home, or to have a job that has that type of flexibility for these circumstances. And I think that we will see a shift in the business community of a lot of organizations giving more faith and more trust to their staff, because this pandemic has forced our hand there. Because if you want to stay in business, you have to let your people work remote, and it doesn't matter if you trust them or not. You have to trust them now. And so that, I think, will kind of set the stage moving forward.
I agree.
Well, Loren, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. You mentioned your website, but how can people, connect with you a little bit more online if that's something that you're interested in sharing?
Yeah, definitely. So again, the website is gettingyouhired.com. I think I have a Twitter account too. Honestly, I don't know what the handle is. We'll just cut that part out and just talk about the website.
If we don't know, we'll definitely put it. We'll definitely put it all in the description of the podcast, so anyone that is interested in that can access it right through the podcast.
Awesome. Well, definitely check out the website. It is semi-frequently updated, but there is a lot of really cool content on there if you're looking for a job or know someone who's looking for a job. Tips about resumes, interviews, phone interviews, video interviews, the whole 9 yards, and just about how to make yourself a more presentable candidate. There's some things that for recruiters are common knowledge, but not necessarily for everyone, and just kind of wanting to share that with the world to help you do the best that you can to make sure that you get the job that you want.
Well, Anthony, you want to take us away?
For sure, man. Guys, thank you for tuning into the show. Make sure to follow all of our socials, which will also be in the description of the podcast. Make sure to connect with us as well. We'd love to highlight your stories and how this virus is impacting your lives at home. You can email us at sixfeetawaypodcast@gmail.com. That's SIXFEET awaypodcast@gmail.com. Alex, you have anything else you want to say?
No, just stay safe, wash your hands, and just keep 6 feet away.